and I'll turn it away to you, Monica.
Sounds good. All right, let's just jump right on in. So, what is the Flex Cash Affordability Program? Well, really, it's a great option for buyers, and traditionally, it's been targeted towards them. However, it's also a powerful listing strategy to help sellers plan ahead for what happens in the event their home isn't getting the movement they are looking for. It helps boost seller confidence in your sales strategy and prepares them for the next step conversation when the house isn't getting the traction they hoped for. So on this slide, we're going to talk about the four most common ways to use seller concessions. All of you are pretty much familiar with these four most common ways to use these concessions. But like we all do, our prejudices over what we feel should work best as a seller concession is often the option we present to the client as the only option. The Flex Cash program, though, provides buyers with that sense of control over having options, not only to structure their biggest investment in a way that works best for them, but to also have that feeling of power and control to make that best decision. The challenge is not all buyers know they have options, and not all sellers understand how to engage more potential clients. The Flex Cash affordability option creates that opportunity, offering buyers different affordability paths not only to support their goals, but also invites more qualified offers to the table, which is what we want to see. So I'm here to illustrate that for you. Okay, so let's start with with a simple example of what a transaction might look like without using the Flex Cash strategy. In this example, we have a family looking at a home with a sales price of $560,000 and they're planning to put 5% down. Based on typical buyer closing costs, which in this example includes about one discount point, along with prepaid taxes and insurance, along with their estimated closing costs. So, what they would need is approximately $41,715.67. At the 5.85 interest rate used in this example, their estimated monthly payment would be about $4,155. So you can kind of see that here. So here's their cash to close and their monthly payment. So this gives us a good starting point. And now that we understand what that transaction looks like with a traditional structure, we can start looking at how the same dollars can be used differently to improve affordability. So here we're going to propose that the seller is going to provide $13,000 in Flex Cash. So this is the most familiar way Flex Cash could be used, helping the buyer with their closing costs. For buyers who may be a little short on funds needed to close, it's very common for them to ask the seller for a concession to help reduce those upfront costs. So this can be an attractive option for sellers who want to make their home more accessible to a larger pool of buyers. In this example, if the seller is willing to offer $13,000 in Flex Cash, those funds could be applied towards the buyer's closing costs. That would reduce the buyer's cash to close from $41,715 down to approximately $28,715. So while this option doesn't change the buyer's monthly payment, it can make a significant difference in the upfront funds required to purchase the home. But what's interesting is that those same 13,000 can be used in ways that directly impact the buyer's monthly payment, which is where the strategy becomes really powerful. So, quick recap. Let's kind of compare the different options. We've got the seller closing cost credit here with the cash to close reduced using that 13,000. So now let's compare that with other options. This one is the permanent rate buy down option. So when buyers are given the choice, many are actually very interested in using seller concessions as a permanent rate buy down. In this option, the buyer has the flexibility to apply some or all of that 13,000 toward discount points to secure an interest rate for the life of the loan. So in this example, using those funds reduces the interest rate down to 5.25, which lowers the buyer's monthly payment by about $209 per month. And that kind of payment reduction can make a meaningful difference for buyers. Sometimes it's the difference between a home feeling just outside their comfort zone and feeling like something they can confidently move forward with. So again, the key takeaway here is that the same 13,000 can be used in different ways depending on what improves affordability the most for that particular buyer. Buyers may negotiate price, but they live with the monthly payment. All right, so now let's talk about one of the most popular Flex Cash options, the temporary 2-1 buy down. This option can be really attractive for buyers who expect their financial picture to improve in the next couple of years. Maybe they're anticipating a raise or paying off other debt. Sometimes it's one spouse qualifying on their own. Maybe they're relocating to our area and the other spouse isn't going to get a job until they get here. So having that lower payment for a little bit helps. Or simply they just need time to settle into a home. It can also appeal to buyers who believe rates may come down and expect they may refinance in the future. It also helps for buyers who may not plan to stay in the home long term and want their payment to feel closer to what they might currently be paying in rent. On this example, you can see how the payment relief works. In year one, the savings is over $600 per month. In year two, that monthly savings is over $300 per month. So the first 2 years, that payment is significantly more manageable. Here's how the mechanics works if you're not familiar with this type of program. The buyer still qualifies at the full market rate, which we can see right here. That's very important. In this example, the locked market rate is 5.875%, but the payment is temporarily reduced. In year one, the payment is calculated as if the rate were 2 percentage points lower than the market rate. In year two, the payment is calculated at 1 percentage point lower than the market rate. Then beginning in the 25th month, the payment simply returns to the original 5.875 market rate that the buyer locked in at. Now, here's the key piece to understand with the Flex Cash program. The seller is essentially funding those payment differences upfront. The total difference between the reduced payments and the full payment over the first 2 years is what creates that $13,000 seller concession in this example. Because the buyer cannot contribute towards this buy down amount, the entire amount must come from the seller in order to market the home with this Flex Cash affordability strategy. And here's something many buyers love about this option. If the buyer refinances or sells the home before the 2-year buy down period ends, any remaining unused funds from that temporary buy down are applied towards their principal balance when the loan is paid off. So those funds are not lost. And that's why the 13,000 amount is used in the Flex Cash Affordability Program example. That number is based on what's required to fully fund the 2-1 buy down. But the nice thing is that that same 13,000 could also be used towards any other Flex Cash affordability options, giving the buyer flexibility to choose the strategy that works best for them. What we want to communicate with sellers is that the Flex Cash isn't a giveaway. It's a payment strategy. Sellers don't need to drop price to improve affordability. They can redirect the money to the payment instead. But let's talk about payment reduction. That's the one that buyers tend to ask for first, reducing the sales price. If a buyer feels the price point is the main obstacle to writing an offer, this option is always available, and sometimes that price adjustment is exactly what helps bring a transaction together. But from an affordability standpoint, we can see reducing the price actually has the smallest impact on the buyer's monthly payment compared to other Flex Cash options. You can see from this illustration, the payment savings is just under $97 per month. So while a price reduction might satisfy a buyer who feels like they need to get a deal, the reality is that it often doesn't move the payment nearly as much as applying those same dollars towards the interest rate strategies or closing costs. That said, it's still an option, and in some situations, it may be the option that ultimately brings both sides to a successful contract negotiation. But here's where this becomes a powerful listing strategy for you as agents. Instead of leading with assumptions about what the buyer should want, you can present the same dollar amount in multiple affordability options and allow the buyer to decide what works best for their situation. When the buyer feels like they have choices and control, they often become much more confident about moving forward, even if it doesn't agree with what you think works best. And sometimes they discover an option that actually improves their affordability more than a simple price reduction would have. So let's take a moment and really look at something important. We've been using the same 13,000 in every example, but look how different the outcomes can be depending on how those dollars are applied. If the buyer applies it towards the closing costs, it reduces their cash to close by 13,000. If those same funds are used towards a permanent rate buy down, the buyer reduces their monthly payment by about $209 per month for the life of the loan. And if those dollars are applied toward a temporary 2-1 buy down, the buyer can see savings of over $600 per month in the first year. So the real takeaway is this. It's not always about reducing the price of the home. It's about using the same dollars strategically to improve affordability. And when buyers understand they have options like this, it can dramatically change how they view the home, whether they feel comfortable writing an offer. The same 13,000 can reduce the price or it can reduce the payment. And most buyers, they care more about the payment. So let's talk about how do you market the Flex Cash program? Any agent can promise a great marketing or suggest a price adjustment, but few walk into a listing appointment prepared with a Flex Cash affordability strategy. When you show sellers that you already have creative options ready to attract more buyers, you position yourself as the professional who plans ahead, not the one who reacts later. As Jared and I run our business, we remind ourselves that we don't compete on price, we compete on competence. And I imagine you guys do the same. So, one simple way to introduce this strategy during a listing appointment might sound something like this. In today's market, one of the biggest challenges buyers face is affordability. Instead of immediately reducing the price of your home, another strategy some sellers are using is offering what we call a flex cash affordability option. It allows buyers to apply those dollars in different ways to improve their monthly payment. The goal is to attract more buyers without necessarily reducing your sales price. Then you can add, I partner with a lender who can show buyers exactly how those funds could work for their specific situation. So you and I don't have to explain the financing side of it. This positions you as a strategic advisor, not just someone listing a property. So on the screen, I want to show you an example of what the Flex Cash outline might look like when presented to a seller. Ideally, this is something you would introduce during the listing appointment, positioning it as a proactive sales strategy, but it can also be introduced later if the market feedback suggests you need to adjust your strategy to generate more interest or foot traffic. You'll notice this example uses a VA loan scenario. The reason we use VA for the illustration is because the 2-1 buy down is calculated off the buyer's loan amount. Since VA financing allows for full financing, it ensures the seller's concession is sufficient to cover the buy down without unintentionally pricing certain buyers out of the Flex Cash option. You'll notice the QR code right here. You can actually scan that now and it will show you a short video of me explaining the Flex Cash Affordability Program directly to the seller. And this is really important. We don't expect you to go in explaining all the financing mechanics. That's our job as the lending partner. So just know our goal is to support you so that you can walk into that listing appointment confidently with proactive solutions. And you can come prepared with strategies like this that shows the sellers that you're approaching the sale of their home strategically, treating it like the investment it truly is. We often talk about real estate as an investment, but when it comes time to sell, many agents feel uncomfortable discussing the numbers. And that's exactly where we step in to help. If we know ahead of time that you have a listing appointment coming up, we can create a custom Flex-Cash worksheet and video for that property. You simply provide the seller with this sheet, either printed or electronically, and they can scan the QR code to watch the explanation. It's a simple way to help sellers understand how a small strategic concession can create multiple affordability options for buyers, which ultimately helps position their home to sell. So you focus on the relationship with the seller and we'll support you with the numbers and strategy behind the scenes. So another simple way to introduce this strategy, in my opinion, is to include the Flex-Cash option directly on your estimated seller net sheet. When you present multiple net sheet scenarios during the listing appointment, you might show the seller what their numbers look like at the full list price and then include an additional example that shows what it would look like if a portion of the proceeds were applied towards the Flex-Cash affordability strategy. The reason is this is because it makes it helpful to see the next step in the conversation. So if the property isn't getting the foot traffic the seller is expecting, instead of introducing a brand new idea later, you can simply pull out the net sheet, circle back to your original conversation and say something like, hey, you remember when we talked about strategy that could help attract more buyers if we needed it? This is where we could use that option. So it keeps the conversation calm, strategic, and focused on solutions because the seller has already seen the numbers and understands the concept from the beginning. So when you introduce this strategy early, it never feels like a last minute adjustment later. Because we all know price attracts attention, but affordability is what creates the offers. All right. So once the seller decides they're open to participating in the Flex-Cash Affordability Program, the next step is making sure buyers know the opportunity exists. So one of the easiest ways to do that is with a simple flyer announcing that the seller is offering Flex-Cash. In this example, the 13,000 we've been using throughout the presentation is listed on the worksheet. Now, you'll notice that the flyer does not outline all of the different financing options. That's intentional. At this stage, we don't yet know what the buyer program, like the loan program the buyer may be using, and we don't want to overwhelm them with too much information. The goal of the flyer is simply to spark curiosity and let buyers know there may be an affordability option available for this home. Once a buyer expresses interest, that's where we can step in as a lender to help them explore how the Flex-Cash could work with their specific loan program and financial situation. Another common question we get is where can this information be shared? And of course, MLS guidelines can vary, and different brokerages may interpret those rules differently. So rather than telling you exactly where something should or shouldn't be posted, the best approach is always check with your broker if you're unsure. But that said, there are a number of ways agents often share this type of information with buyers. Some examples include like non-restricted listing websites, single property websites, printed flyers available in the home during the showings, open houses, social media posts, the seller sharing within their own social network, sign writers or property marketing materials, and of course, realtor group pages and email announcements to your buyer database. The goal is simply to let buyers know the opportunity exists and then connect them with a lender who can walk them through how the Flex-Cash could work for them. And of course, we're always happy to brainstorm compliant marketing ideas with you so you can get the word out while still staying within your brokerage guidelines. Okay, we have this Flex-Cash Affordability Realtor Toolkit that we can send out with the recording after the class. It just talks about the Flex-Cash Affordability Program. And I love this little blurb down at the bottom. It's always a good reminder for all of us. Don't compete on commissions, compete on competence. And then just some pro tips with the Flex-Cash Affordability Program with our contact information. We love it when you guys reach out to us. We love to help whenever we can. And then before we move on to questions, I do want to make sure that everybody is aware of the next classes coming up. The next one Jared is teaching here about Credit 101, which in any buyer class that I've ever taught, credit is the thing that people engage on most. And so having some material and information that you can send out to your database after that class is really, really great, a great way to engage buyers and get them talking because, as you will hear me say every time, conversations equal contracts. So, if you guys are interested, just scan the QR code. It'll take you to the website where you can sign up for the classes, or just comment RSVP in the comments or Q&A section. And we'll do it for you. Like, we can take care of it. Just say RSVP all classes. If you RSVP to the classes, what's really nice when Jared and I remember to record is that we will send you the recording after. I have a couple agents today that weren't able to make it because they have appointments. They need to go to a showing, which is like, do that instead, and we can send you the recording after. So make sure to sign up, or just let us know that you want us to sign up for you. And with that, we'll move on to questions.
All right. So can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So we do have a couple questions I did forget to mention. So if anyone doesn't, for those that have not been on here before, there's a Q&A button, there's a chat button as well. You can choose either one of those to send over a question if you have any. But we do have one. It says, how much time do you need to put together a flex cash option for a seller?
So, like, you can help answer this too, Jared. I feel like it's really helpful if we have like 48 hours notice, just because, we might be working on other files and things like that, and we want to be able to dedicate enough time to get you something pretty solid. And so 48 hours would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah. Um, Another question. Pretty good. Can you put together a video for a buyer? That is a good question. So instead of like you talked about seller, but can you put one together for a buyer?
We can definitely put one together for a buyer. Um, but we want to have the conversation with the buyer first, because there are there's too many different ways we could approach the program, and we want to make sure that we are catering that video to the loan program. Their credit score is like could totally drive some of those figures, their down payment. So all of those things with the loan program are important to know before we create that video and send it out. But we are happy to do that.
Sweet. Well, I think that's everything. Um, yes, we get to end a couple minutes early, which is always really good. So anyways, appreciate everyone for hopping on. We will send out the recording, and hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day and week. Thanks.
Awesome. Bye, everyone.